Hello and welcome to another episode of the Inspired in Berlin podcast. My guest today, and our very first guest, is Erol Baykal. Erol is a dear colleague, a wonderful person, somebody who has had a whole bunch of transformations in his life. He went from academia to programming and along the way started a bunch of businesses, thinking of starting some new ones. It's always a joy to talk to you, Errol, and I'm really happy that you are here today. I think we're going to have one heck of a conversation. Welcome.
Uh, uh, Thanks, Balach. Thanks for having me as a guest on your show. So one of the things that I do is I have a podcast with another colleague of mine, and I think I did around 40 episodes. Um, but today I'm nervous. Like I told you before the recording, it's very strange to be on this side, but nice to be here. And thanks for
Well,
the kind introduction, by the way.
always. The nervousness is shared because this is, as I said, the first episode of Inspired with a guest on, and the first one with video. I have no idea how this is going to come out, but I think we're going to be fine.
Yeah, pretty sure of that.
Awesome. Let's start right away with transformations. Now, I know at least of a few transformations. You started in academia and you were on your way to becoming a researcher, and you are a published author of a book on the Ottoman press. Um, and then, one way or another, eventually now you are a programmer focusing on iOS. And along the way, you had a food truck business. And I'm sure there's a whole bunch of things that I don't know yet that we will discover in this episode. Um, how, how is this process of transformation? Just kind of on the high level, because I'm getting so many questions already in my mind. How do you feel going from one thing to a very different thing?
Extremely comfortable. Um, and I'll get to why I became comfortable with transformations because there's a whole history behind it. But comfortable to the point that I'm now in a conundrum where I feel like I can do almost anything I want. So basically, now it's becoming difficult to choose what I want to do.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. Um, Let me ask you a very specific question. Is there a sense of loss when you leave academia? Because for our viewers and our listeners, maybe you can tell a bit more about your journey as well. When you left academia, having been a published author of a very research heavy topic, you left it behind. You're not involved anymore at all, and you are more or less a full-time programmer along with some of the other things. Is there a sense of loss and sadness at leaving something behind?
Yes. So as you transform, since the topic is transformation, I'm going to use that lingo here. So as you transform through the different stages of your life, there's this bittersweet a sense of loss as you look back. Like there was a good friend of yours, which is something you spend a lot of your time on doing. And in this case, for example, you brought up my academic past. Yes, I went to university for a very long time. I did research, I did a PhD, I did my postdoctoral projects, I published, and that the thing I was doing was part of me to the way that to the point that you start identifying yourself with what you do. Um, you become what you do, which is a nice reference to one of the episodes you did about being and doing. So uh, it always feels like closing a chapter, and there's a sense of sadness. But I look back at it fondly. But such is life. We move forward, and that's the point. What I want to make about choosing and losing. So. In Dutch, which is the language we also speak in the Flemish part of Belgium, there is a saying, and it translates very well into English, and that's choosing is losing.
Oh,
So
wow.
ahead of you there are many roads, and the moment you choose, like you dedicate yourself to one road, the other two become either inaccessible, or there's a high cost to make that jump over to that track. So yes, you both lose in terms of you lose an occupation or a pastime or an identity or a good friend, if you wanted to look at it that way. But at the same time, you're also losing options.
Right. And this is interesting. So now we're kind of unpacking this process from the rear end, right? So the sense of loss, having made a choice and transformed into something else. What what gets you to make this choice when something new presents itself? Is this an internally driven process? At what point do you say, now I choose this new thing over something else? Perhaps you have had multiple things to choose from, or has it always been something new comes up to replace something else?
I think it's influenced by both external factors and internal factors. To give you an example, or many examples of this sort, people usually ask me, like, how did you end up doing that? And it just always boils down to, yeah, something unexpected happened. And then there was somebody who suggested, why don't you do this? And I listened to them. And I end up in strange and wonderful places because of this. I give you one example is, how I ended up in my academic career. Was after I graduated from secondary education, I actually wanted to start, as an entrepreneur, start my own shop, want to sell computers, build computers. But my mom, she said, I'm okay with that. It'd just be nice, like a favor to your mom. Why don't you go and get me a degree, and we'll call it even for for having
Okay.
She said, this is one request of you, from you. So, and I listened to that, and I ended up doing a PhD in Cambridge. So I tend to take advice from people, and this fits in as the external thing. So other things along that journey, for example, I started my studies actually in computer science, but I thought it was extremely boring. And uh,
Okay.
9/11 had happened around that time, and here's an external event where suddenly the question of the Middle East, Islam, religion, etc., was becoming extremely more important in the world we lived in.
Right.
But before I connected that, as I was searching for what I want to do, I was into philosophy. So I started studying philosophy at university. I stopped computer science, etc.
Okay.
And one of the professors said during one of the lectures, "Look, philosophy is all about questions, not about answers. If you want answers, you need to go to the theology faculty." And I took that very literally. I After that course, I just walked out and walked over to the theology faculty and
Wow.
just randomly started talking to somebody there. I'm a smoker. He was smoking, so we're doing the whole smoker thing. Like, you got a light? Yeah. What are you doing? And he said,
Mhm.
"Hey, uh, I'm doing Islamic studies." And I said, "What? What's that?" And he said, "Yeah, there's this whole course at the university about Middle Eastern and Islamic studies."
Mhm.
And with the whole 9/11 thing, also posing me questions about my identity, who I was, how Islam fits into society, how it fits into my history. So, well, hey, here's something that's an opportunity that's being thrown into my lap. And I walked over here, randomly met this person just because the professor said go to the theology faculty.
Mhm.
So I just attended one of their classes, and here I was studying Middle Eastern studies with a heavy focus on Arabic studies. And then there was the professor who, as I was finishing my degree there, he said, Errol, I would rather you focus on Turkish and Ottoman studies.
Mhm.
And what did I do? I listened to this person, this professor, and I changed my focus from Arabic studies into Ottoman poetry. And from there on, he said, "Well, it's time for you to go abroad." And he said, "You should go to Cambridge." And so I applied to Cambridge, and the professor who was receiving me there said, "Yeah, come on over. You can do your Ottoman poetry stuff here." So
Mhm.
I go over there, and the day I arrive, she says, "Well, after the whole application process and acceptance process, she says, well, here's the thing: you can't do Ottoman poetry here. I'm going to need you to focus on history." So I said, "Yeah, sure, why not? Here's somebody who's knowledgeable, and they see something in me. I'll follow that." Then I wanted, after my master's degree, I had no intention of doing a PhD, but this professor and some of my friends there were saying, you should do a PhD. So I was looking into doing a PhD in migration studies at Oxford, but then my professor in Cambridge said, "No, no, I want you to stay here." So I said, okay.
Okay.
Uh, So there's a lot of, for me personally, um, listening to people along the way,
Mhm.
like people who I think are knowledgeable and intelligent and definitely further in life than I am, and taking their advice seriously. This usually launches me into a path of transformation.
Wow. It's a fascinating journey because there are so many questions that come up, but I want to focus on this thing of listening to other people because as I coach people as well as what I've heard from other people and also in my own journey, when we are left to our own devices, oftentimes this process of choosing can be very paralyzing. And I see a whole lot of people kind of going in circles, knowing all the facts, kind of having even a stated intention to transform or make a choice, still take a whole lot of time to get through that process. And I always talk about getting support because going through any transformation is not easy. You seem to have mastered this art one way or another, where you just right away start from listening to somebody else and diving right in. Um, do you ever have any doubts?
Yeah, definitely. So the thing I was going to say to that is, no, I admire people who know what they want to do in their lives, and I respect them a lot. Even for things where, as a society, we might not respect those choices, but I do. Like, if you know what you want to do with your life, even if there's no status attached to that, but you really want to do that, you dedicate yourself to that, that's wonderful. Now, me, I'm almost 40. I still don't know what I want to do with my life. So therefore, I'm susceptible to changing. So a lot of transformation means there's somebody who, you know, doesn't really know what they want to do with their life. And I think the fact that I listen to people is because I feel otherwise lost. And
Interesting.
um, having guides along the way is just a fantastic thing to have. If I had not listened to people around me, who knows where I might have ended up. But I had the need for guidance. And I don't say everybody needs that. Like I said, there are people who are very dedicated and driven. They know where their compass is pointing. I don't. I'm just like a leaf being blown around in the wind, but I'm perfectly okay with that. I enjoy life this way. I'm just ready to be surprised.
Wow, that's impressive. So you don't seem like a person who has trouble with motivation. Then you get your guidance and off you go. Or is there something to it? Do you have something that you use to motivate yourself? Do you find yourself reflecting on that, or are you the go getter? You see a target and off you go.
Um, First, I want to talk about why I think I'm not afraid of transformation. Just
Okay.
do historically with the fact that I moved a lot when I was a kid, and moving around a lot meant changing homes, changing cities, changing schools, and these were terribly difficult times in my life. Imagine you're in kindergarten and you're leaving all your friends behind, or you're in going into secondary education. You switch schools and you move cities. You're a teenager trying to fit into this crowd, into that crowd. I did high school in three different schools.
Perhaps you can tell our listeners a bit more about where you were you and maybe some of these transformations. So you grew up in and around Antwerp, or
Yeah, I mean, just most of my life has been in and around the province of Antwerp. This is correct. So I was born in a small town mall, and I lived there until I was 4, and then we had to move to the big city because my aunt was going to study there, and my mom sort of went along. So immediately you go from this small town to a big city as a kid, and there's like traffic and people, a lot of people, and different types of buildings. Then After some years, back to Mol, then to Leuven. Then I went to Canada. Then I went to the United Kingdom, lived in Turkey, came back, and in among all those things, there's always this one constant of constantly changing where I was. And the traumatic nature of changing one's environment in terms of geography and therefore also surroundings. I lived through that a lot as a kid, and although initially those are very traumatic times, you do learn one thing, and that is that it's not the end of the world, and these are actually opportunities. So you lose things but new things open, and I think that's
Right.
where I learned that the only constant thing in your life is yourself. And wherever you go, just make the best of it for yourself. And uh, I know some people, like many people I know, like they're born in a village or a town, and they live their whole lives there. So
Mm-hmm.
imagine somebody like that, aside from holidays, never leaving their town, always the same friends, always the same environments. They if they're, for example, let's say 30, and you now ask them like, okay, now it's time to transform, they might be more scared of jumping into the pool.
Right.
An analogy which I see is, for example, in Lord of the Rings. In when Frodo leaves the Shire and he goes on an entire adventure, the epilogue, or the final parts of the book, is he comes back and he doesn't feel like he fits there anymore. That's
Right.
something I actually experienced myself.
Mm-hmm.
So you leave your town and you travel the world and you come back, and like what happened to me, I came back to my small town after several tramps abroad, and you just realize everything is exactly like I left it behind. It's the same topics, it's the same things going on, and this is beautiful. So there's this
Mm-hmm.
constant thing evolving there.
Mm-hmm.
But for you, you come back with many more perspectives, and having seen uh, many more surroundings, you
Yeah.
start to see it as a box, and it starts to feel cramped. Whereas for
Right.
those people, that might be their entire universe, but this is a single universe in a series of, like there's this multiverse of small surroundings or communities or whatever.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm really stressing this, Balaj, is because I'm personally convinced that this lies at the root of my ability, or I'll call it ability, to just say, you know what, um, I'm just going to do something completely different that I never thought about doing, or because why? It's not the end of the world. You've been through those traumas and you've survived every one of them, and you came out stronger, and you realize that loss brings opportunities for new things.
Wow. That's a very poetic and beautiful way of putting it. Loss brings opportunities for new things. Amazing. Um, you mentioned kind of people living in a box. Now, we took the example of people living perhaps in a smaller place where there's not much change. But I think it's also true for people living in big cities. Oftentimes, we create our own boxes and we live within that box of familiarity where there's not too much change, and we um, naturally avoid any change because, well, it forces you to lose something and discover a new opportunity without any guarantees. So there's a bit of that staying in a box thing, but the other part you mentioned, kind of being comfortable with change, um, is it something that you see as a matter of practice in some way? Kind of circumstances just kept you
Exactly.
practicing this change.
That was the point that I was trying to make. I think everybody has it in their. As long as they practice it, everybody can learn to change.
It's an
And
it's an
I had a lot of practice at a young age. So for me now, is if tomorrow I'd say, okay, I'm going to move to the United States, at the spur of the moment thing, and my wife agrees, and okay, we'll put the kids in. It it's on the table for me. It's like, why not?
Wow. What a sense of freedom it must be to not be limited by anything or most things that most people really feel limited by.
Like, I want to just say two things here. I hope I don't forget them. Um, so, like my life, my internal world, my thought is just like not very well organized. It can, can go wherever the day takes me, and that's not always a good thing. So, I don't want to say good or bad. I want to say different. So, in society or in world, like in human civilization, you know, there are different types of people, and we need to have different types of people. So, if I enjoy the fact that I can immerse myself into these different boxes, that's because other people build those boxes. I'm not a box builder, I'm a box explorer. But without those people that build those boxes, there's nothing for me to explore. But you also need explorers. Why? If you're, imagine us as cave dwelling beings, like you always need that person who's like, it's all okay here. I'm just gonna go see what's behind that mountain, okay?
Right.
And not everybody is cut out for that, and not everybody should be. We shouldn't, like, the goal is not to say to everybody, you should go out and explore, or transform, etc. We just need to appreciate the fact that people come in different flavors. But the flavor, how much of it is genetic, as how much of it is something you practiced and you're like, oh, I'm pretty good at this, and you take that with me, that I don't know. Can everybody learn to accept change? Yes. You're forced to, at points in your life. You're going to lose somebody you love, your parents, your spouse, your children. This is huge changes, and everybody's met with that.
Yeah.
And you're, but the frequency of those life altering changes, and the size of those life altering changes, and when they occur in your life, will obviously have an impact on who you are, whether or not you have it in you. There's a difference between the talent and the practice, right? Some people are
Right.
more talented, and a little bit of practice takes them there.
Mm-hmm.
That's a different topic altogether. But should everybody be striving to be a transformer, like an
Mm-hmm.
Optimus Prime type of thing? I would say, I don't say yes, because I don't know for a fact whether my life is better than somebody who just builds a box, or contributes to the box.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting. Well, first I agree with you, and it's a topic that I've been thinking about actually the last couple of days, because I was thinking about it in terms of I seem to have become a person who likes to do a lot of things and gains a lot of energy out of it. Um, and it kind of, in a way, that ability of being comfortable with change, or being able to distribute your focus across many different things, is a very interesting and useful skill to have. But does everybody have to be like that? Um, I guess the answer is no. And what I came up with was, we are all unique with our unique set of skills, abilities, experiences. However, if you find in yourself a bit of stress or desire or wish to change, if you feel that something is not quite right, then in a way, you have to confront change, however small or big, because something is not quite right, and your subconscious is telling you that. In that moment, it becomes crucially important to have this skill, and the more of it you have, the easier it is going to be to transform. And um, transformation doesn't, again, necessarily have to be easy, but it is a process of getting somewhere else. And what I'm personally interested in, people kind of living and expressing themselves fully. So a transformation is kind of like a in between limbo-ish process. And so I'm like, if it is something that you ever feel the need for, then go ahead and get all the skills you can. It is not necessarily going to make your life easier or happier, but it is definitely going to add a lot more meaning to it, and perhaps put you in a place that you can't even imagine yet. So this was a bit of a stream of consciousness. The thing with transformation is, um, I think to some extent, transformation is forced upon us. As you said,
Hmm.
there are certain things that are simply not in our control. 9/11 happening, you mentioned that had such an impact on so many people across the world who perhaps couldn't put New York on a map before, or didn't know how many people a passenger aircraft can carry, or had no clue what some of the perpetrators were up to before. Like there was so much newness that happened and impact that happened as a result of that. That that was on a world level. You can have tsunamis and Chernobyl blowing up and creating a change across the globe in how we create energy. There are certain things that happen on that level, and then on a personal level, you might lose a loved one or a friend.
You might want to say maybe like there's push to change and pull to change, right?
Exactly, and the push to change is almost a given,
Hmm.
and
You
that's
cannot
why
escape from it. Yeah.
you cannot escape from it. And to some extent, then having a bit of exposure to it, or exposing yourself to it, is kind of like gaining a life skill.
Hmm.
Hopefully you will not need it in extreme amounts. Hopefully change will be kind of small and incremental, which happens for us every single day. We get older, our physiology changes, and thereby some of the things we can and cannot do. But if you will ever need it, with COVID or etc., that it helps to have that skill to some extent, or at least to have reflected upon it, to see, are you so set in your ways that any change will really put you in panic mode, and then you would have to basically have the traumatic experience of transformation and not necessarily a positive one. I think from that point of view, it's almost something, a bit of exploration on purpose. Sounds like a really good idea to me.
Um, to me as well. But I want to reiterate what I said before about not everybody should feel it's not because you're not changing, that your life is less meaningful. I would either even go as far as to say that those who change a lot are basically more seeking things, and those who don't feel a need to change maybe don't are not seeking for that meaning or have found the meaning in something else. For me, I mean, let's say you're in a terrible situation, and I feel, and you feel, and other people feel you're in a terrible situation. Let's get an example. Let's say you're in a relationship with an abusive spouse, and there's physical violence involved, and so that's like a horrible situation, right? Or maybe something different is where you're in a job where maybe you're being bullied at your job for for whatever reason, and it's taking to places where you're feeling incredibly dark, or there's something with your health. You need to maybe pick up more exercise because of this and that reason. Now, for the outside spectators to your life, many of them might come to you and say, you need to, transform who you are or your surroundings to change this thing. And you would, maybe you wouldn't. My point is that whatever you choose to do, that is your story. And choosing not to change or being afraid of the change does not make your life less valuable or less well lived. Like if we're going to give people points, like you don't get extra points in life for having transformed more often. The the life of somebody who goes through suffering has its own poetic beauty, and their inability to change only adds more bittersweetness to that little strand of experience running through the universe, and we might feel sorry for them. um, but at the same time, those type of people also make this world a beautiful place. In all the tragedy that exists within it, we get inspired by them, We get emotional looking at those situations. They make us more into humans. So the transformation as a tool towards the perfect life, I think, is not something that I would prescribe, because changing yourself, transforming yourself, is not going to take you to the perfect life. You're basically, like I said, the only constant is yourself. You transform, but yourself, or you might say, argue, change as well, but you're not going to get to the point where you think, oh yeah, I changed a lot, now this is where I am. No, the exact opposite is going to happen. You start changing and it becomes addictive, and suddenly you're addicted to change. So you're going to be restless. You're going to still be wondering, oh, let's find the next mountain, let's find the next mountain. And your death is going to be what is caused by your transformation. You're more likely to fall off a cliff, because you're one of those, I'm going to see what's there. I want change. I want transformation. And you're going to have maybe a non-traditional death compared to the other people in your tribe, if you will. But let's not put values on which one was better or which one was bad, because in the end, we need all of these things around us, and be respectful and um, appreciative of all these things happening around us. So transformation, um, yes, it's a tool that you can use, uh, but you don't have to use it. And not using it or not investing in it, you shouldn't feel bad about it. Like, if you're bad at transforming, don't feel bad about it, because at the end of the day, it doesn't affect the preciousness of your experience. Is this too out there, what I'm saying? I don't know, Balat. You always bring this type of stuff out of me. Like,
No, this is perfect. This is perfect. Thank you for putting it that way. And um, I think this is something that we often forget. We end up glorifying one way of being over another. Um, the novice monks or Buddhists would look at someone like you and me and would be like, these guys are chasing after things all day long. Wouldn't it be nice for them if they could just learn to sit still for a few hours?
Mhm.
Um, so, and the novice coach in me would be like, but I see you suffering. I'm here to support you.
Mhm.
Let's get you transforming. Um, and kind of putting a value on the opposite side, but there is beauty to you as a living being to begin with, and it is of such extent that nothing else can eclipse it. Perhaps that kind of from a value point of view, life and you are valuable and equally valuable. Perhaps your actions could be judged, and for that we have enough judges out there and social norms. So you and I don't have to be that. I do agree. It is about who you are, not necessarily what you do outwardly that gives meaning to your life. There is something that I think about, as I said, especially the last couple of days, this idea of being somebody who's actively doing a lot of things and transforming versus somebody who's much more stable and also seemingly at peace. Um, um, and a lot of us tend to want peace. So in a way, perhaps the peaceful and more stable person is more valuable. But no, let's go back. This idea of living your full expression. This is something that I wish for everybody. Now, it may be that your full expression is transforming and trying new things. And perhaps there's a bit of truth to being addicted to change, because that's what you did for a long time and it's harder for you to sit still. But regardless, if that is your full expression, great. If somebody else's full expression is to consciously choose to remain stable,
Mhm.
then for me there's equal value. I think where I draw the line is, if you're suffering, whether through activity or inactivity, is where kind of it goes to my heart, and then I go like, but can't we help you? And not all change has to be external. Maybe it is just internal change, but there is kind of a need for change because you're suffering, and that is why in some way you must confront this demon. So there has to be something to it, um, and kind of
Okay,
it's
let's boil people's lives down to TV.
mhm.
So let's say you have one of those old TVs and it just receives one station, and you get to watch one program. You don't even get to choose what's on. You're just watching it.
Okay.
And on the other end, you got somebody who's got Netflix, Disney Plus, Apple TV Plus, HBO Max, and let's measure the experience joy that these people get out of these two circumstances. The dilution of experience through the availability of choice actually prevents the the object from experiencing what they do properly. And I'll give you the example like this. When you have Netflix and you start watching a movie and it doesn't, you don't like in the first 5 minutes, like, you know, ain't nobody got time for this. You just click it off, go to the next one, right?
Been there, done that.
Often now, let's meet somewhere in the middle. Back in the days, like when you used to go to the video rental store, and you look at the boxes, you're like, oh, this is interesting. You brought back 3 cassette tapes or DVDs, and you put it in your entertainment system, and you start watching. The first 5 minutes are maybe stupid, but you're like, you know what? I'll just watch it. And at the end, maybe you're like, oh, the first 5 minutes were not so much fun, but I really enjoyed it anyway. You didn't lose out on that, but also you didn't lose out on the idea of I'm investing a lot of time in this particular choice while there's so many other choices. So we know this as, also let's focus also on the other end of the spectrum. So there's a TV, it's through an antenna aerial, it receives one channel, probably the state thing, but everybody's just looking at this and it's like whatever's coming out of it is magical. It's like, oh man, this is so awesome. Not all of it is exactly cut out to my taste, but I'm learning to appreciate other things because I don't have a choice. I need to look at this and I'm appreciating things which I would not have appreciated. So the Flemish wisdom that says choosing is losing, you can add on to that by saying choice creates loss, in that you're always looking for, potentially always looking for what is best. There was a TED talk about choice being something very detrimental to quality of life. In give the example of buying blue jeans. When we were kids, you go to the store. There's like blue jeans, and you put them on. It's like, okay, you're out of the store. Now you go to the mall, and there's like 5 stores selling each 40 different blue jeans, like bootleg, whatever, like loose fit, all those mumbo, like
Mm-hmm.
stonewashed.
Mm-hmm.
So your journey does not end until you pick the blue jeans where you say, okay, this is good enough. But
Yeah.
you leave the mall thinking, if I have sought a bit harder, I was going to find the perfect one.
Yeah.
So this is the price you pay for choice. And therefore, when you ask me, Errol, you know, transformation, you're good at it. That's a good thing. You sort of, you paint it positively, and I'm just trying to counterweight it with saying, at the beginning I said something along the lines of the position I'm in now is, think of all those things that I could be doing, and I'm doing this. Should I not be doing something else? And that's also another wonderful place to be in.
Mm-hmm. That's I want to take it into a particular direction. But before I do, I want to tell you, I grew up with all of the things you mentioned. I grew up with one state channel on a very small TV, and that's all you got.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was very happy with it. We used to get 10 minutes of cartoons in the morning, and they were the best cartoons I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even remember the name anymore, but I remember the images. Um, and I went through the blue jeans process as well. I grew up in Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was a bit delayed in getting there. And now I go through the Netflix experience. And just yesterday, we were watching a movie on Netflix, and after 5 minutes, after 2 minutes, we were like, let's give it 2 more minutes, and after 5 minutes, you're like, nope, cut. Um, and there's just way too much choice. In a way, we have to live with this every day. Do we watch a TED talk, or do we check out what's new on Netflix, or should we try this series, or should we go for a movie, or should we read a book, or should we listen to a podcast? It's just way too much. And in a way, a lot of the issues that we talk about, this kind of um, analysis paralysis, too many choices, having kind of becoming addicted to change, or having to put up even a facade that you are this transformer person, because that is what people around you value. It's all stems from kind of the modern world that we live in, and perhaps life was perhaps not necessarily easier, but simpler before, or when you can make it so right now. Having said that, now that we live in this world where there are a lot of choices, and you find yourself in this situation where you're like, oh, I could be doing something else. I could be living somewhere else. It could be a different company where I work. It could be a different business I could work. It could be a different type of food that I could be presenting at my food truck. How do you choose? Um, is there some sort of a criteria or combination of
Yeah.
criterias?
Um, okay, I'm going to respond to that question. Please remind me if I forget to respond to that. But I want to add something about choice and doing things in life as well. So one thing I often hear around me from younger people than myself is they say, I don't get it. I went to school, I got my degree, and I'm doing this job, and I'm making the end of the month, but I'm not wealthy, and I don't have the disposable income. And then I look at these other people who didn't even go to school, and they run these successful businesses, and I don't know what's happening there. And here's my response to it these days. I tell them, the difference between you and that person is they have no choice. You can do, like, if your current employer, you don't like it, you go to work somewhere else. You got choices. They don't, because they don't have choices. For example, somebody starts a car wash. They put together the money to invest in the thing, and they dedicate themselves to that. Like, there's nothing else in the world, because this person knows, like, I have no options. It's either this, or I'm going to work in the factory, or something. They put 100% of themselves into that choice.
Right.
Therefore, the if you limit choices, you get more focus.
Mhm.
And an outcome of that is where you see that people with fewer choices, if you value, wealth, they might end up getting farther ahead of you, because they didn't have the option to choose. So
Mhm.
I just want to balance, choice versus no choice. Now, coming back to your question, the way I choose the things I do, like I said, it's completely random. Man, I have no clue what I'm doing with my life. Absolutely none at all. And the funny thing is, people come to me and they sort of have the impression that I got my stuff together. No, I absolutely don't. I'm just completely random, like I said, like a leaf in the wind. I get blown left and right. I wish, I have a goal in life. There is this one thing I really want, which is I want to, before I die, hopefully, I want to open my own school, but I completely, in the style which I think education should be in, for impoverished families as well. Creating opportunities, creating this new group of adventurers, if you will. But uh, aside from that, you know, what are my goals in life? I think they're pretty basic and very uninspiring. I want to make a lot of money, because I like things. I'm sorry. You can hate me for all you want, but I like my big TVs, and if I could get a bigger TV, I'd get one. I like cars. I like eating at fancy restaurants. I like going on holidays. I like living in a nice house. I like, not much into clothes, but I like shiny things and objects. And maybe that is what's driving me to come to decisions about, what's my next transformation is going to be. Right now, I'm in a state in my life where I try to think what's going to generate more income for me.
Okay.
Whereas if you were to ask me this question like 10 years ago, so the randomness factor is still in there. While I was doing my studies, I was led on this path by like my mother said, you should go study. And then this whole concept in my family of seeking knowledge as the goal itself, not like what's at the end of the road. Because a lot of people used to ask, what's at, like, once you graduate from whatever stupid thing you're studying, what kind of job are you going to do? I said, I don't really care.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, my drive was absolutely not materialistic. But I went through 10 years of that where I said, my focus is not materialistic. Towards, as I was about to graduate, the question came more to the foreground. Like, you know, I did all these things, and, I worked to pay for my studies. I got into a little bit of debt. How am I going to pay these things back?
Mm-hmm.
Then materialism became more important. And right now I'm in that phase. And another thing in my life right now is the fact that I have family and children. And so any transformation is basically not really driven by goals with me, unless you have these major targets, like acquisition of knowledge and wisdom, or the attempt to attain wisdom, or material gains, and now making sure my kids have everything they want. um I'm sorry, Balach. I'm a pretty simple simple person. Just- I'm not inspired,
Mm. It's it no. I think what is important is that you are who you are.
Yeah,
You know, and at the end of the day, it's kind of, who cares if you're not. You made it sound as if your life is all about money right now, but you're not chasing billions of dollars. You're not opening up all sorts of new ventures and trying to raise money and build unicorns left, right, and center. It is still a very normal human drive with certain responsibilities and a wish to live a relatively comfortable life, and that's absolutely fine. Because one of the things that drives me, and I want to really, I hope I'm able to maintain that thread with Inspired and with everything else I do, is kind of putting things in practical terms, and kind of keeping your feet on the ground way of thinking. When I think of transformation, it's also not about somebody going from rags to riches. When I think about putting your house in order, I really mean putting your house in order, and not necessarily becoming the next success story, and showing up on TV or something. And that's important, because that's most of us on this planet. There's a tiny fraction, which, given the right amount of luck and opportunities, can go from a white collar job to becoming the richest man on earth, and Jeff Bezos or some other people. But the rest of us are really living a day to day life within which there are many small transformations or choices to make, or no choices, and kind of work that just needs to be done because you simply have a lot less to choose from. Um, and that's absolutely beautiful. And within that, there's also a lot to learn, because talking to you, I feel like there's a certain degree of stability and peace of mind that is reflected when you mention all these things. You don't seem to be bitter about being a leaf that is being blown around by the wind. In fact, your life has turned out to be okay enough, and you seem to be happy with it. Kind of, you also don't seem to value this over anything else, or anything else over this way of being. You seem to be a fairly stable and at peace person. And to me, I think if I ask why enough times from enough people, and also I've done this for myself, why do I want to do this? Why do I want to do this? Why do I want to have Epic and Inspired Up and blah, blah, blah? Asked enough times, it comes down to, I just want to live in peace, and I want to see people around me being at peace. However that looks is besides the point. Whether we are dancing all the time, or living exactly the same life as now, changing Netflix movies after 5 minutes. But if we are at peace, that's enough for me. That's what I want.
I'll tell you what this is, what I think it is, right? By the way, Thank you for your analysis. I don't know. I'll need to reflect on it whether I'm in a state of peace or stability. I am very comfortable with who I am. I was not always. I'm a bit of an eccentric person, but I took that and I ran with it in terms that I embrace who I am. Um, and I'm not going to be ashamed of my quirkiness or my opinionated being, etc. Or it is what it is. I have no other choice when it comes to myself. I accept this, and this is a good thing. But if you look at if you ask people why often enough they come back to this fantasy of them of being in peace, being lazy, and just having a good time with people you love. I think this is because people want to go back to their childhood. And like you said, when I was a kid, I watched this cartoon. It was wonderful. Now ask your father how he was looking at the world when you were a kid watching cartoons. Maybe he was worrying about mortgage or rent or his job or his boss, etc. So when the way I interpret yeah, the biblical story of Adam and Eve being expulsed from the Garden of Eden, I think it's just an interpretation. So nobody, like, I'm not a theologist, and you might interpret it differently, or I might interpret it even in a different way. But here's one interpretation that I give to it. So when Adam and Eve basically eat of the apple, what they gain is knowledge, consciousness, and I think a kid is less conscious than an adult. A kid sort of just is, that's what makes kids kids. And they live in this garden where they are provided for, normally speaking, if they if they're living in a healthy family, but there's everything there. And there's no shame, for example. Kids just walk around naked sometimes and go out with, put on some clothes, you know um, they're provided for. And then once they eat from the tree of knowledge, and they start to know what is good and what is bad, which is when you go through maybe adolescence and you start to look at life in a different way than a child does. You get nuances. You start to question sometimes the thing you do yourself. That's another thing. Kids don't question what they do. Everything they do is right. But adults go into that mode where, is this right or wrong? And then this longing of, I was at peace in this garden where I was surrounded by people who love me and care for me. So how do I recreate this? Like, I don't have a job. I don't have to worry about eating and drinking. There's my friends around me, and basically all we do is play. And because for me as well, my biggest fantasy is that, aside from the school, is that really I would love to do whatever I want that day and not worry about food and survival and mortgages and rent and um, politics and global change and World War III or IV with Russia or energy, blah blah blah. No, just have a good time with good people. And the way we envision that we can have this in today's society, in this system that we set up, is you need to be you don't need to be a Jeff Bezos, but it helps to be a Jeff Bezos to do what you want and see, at least when it comes to materialistic things, that everybody's provided for and taken care of in and around your family or your friends or the people you want to be with. So this is my theory of why people really want to go back to that life that they had as kids.
I think
Because that's also
so.
transformation, mind you.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to just add to that, because perhaps you're right 80%, perhaps you're right 99%. There's definitely some truth to that. The innocence of childhood, kind of the ignorance is bliss. If we could just
Hmm.
go back to that and not have to deal with all this knowledge and choice. But if I think about it for myself, and I don't know how it is for you, I would like to have that innocent playfulness, but with adult faculties. Because when I was a child, there was no sex in my life. I had no clue what sex was. Now I do. I don't want to go back to being a child. I also had no choice of friends and games. There was a lot of free flow, and I would like some of that in my life. but I also know a lot of games and sports and different people, and I would like to have keep a bit of that choice as well still, to hang out with different people for different purposes. There's a lot kind of interesting or exciting about being an adult,
Hmm.
which kind of sacrifices a bit of that innocence for a bit of this adventure. And perhaps the answer lies somewhere in the middle, or a combination of both, at least for me. Because as much as I would love that just ease of being, there wasn't much knowledge, on the kinder aspect, or on kind of the lofty, or let's say, there's a word for it, but I forget. Kind of virtue signaling. Yes, that's the word. Now, as an adult, I care about people genuinely. As a child, I was perhaps empathizing a lot. I see you in pain, I feel as if I'm in pain. I cry with
Hmm.
you, and then we forget about it together. Now it is much more conscious. I care about your suffering or somebody else's suffering, and I wish that there was less of it. And it kind of gives me a bit of work to do, you know.
Hmm.
And I've come to appreciate that in a way. And I don't want to lose all of this and
Hmm.
replace it just with pure play.
Hmm.
I want a bit of this excitement as well.
Yeah.
And I guess that's, I wonder if that's what we forget. When we haven't made things clear for ourselves, sometimes we wish for innocence, but not really. Or other times we wish for adventure, but not all the time. But while we haven't made it clear, we are kind of like swinging in different
Hmm.
directions, and kind of feeling this tension.
Focus to me means you can't be everything. You got to choose
Mhm,
what you want to be. And I really liked your example and the things you brought up, because it made me think again of transformation comes at a cost. So the loss, you say you wave goodbye to some things. You had a chapter as a child, and you look
mhm,
back at it fondly, and like that was awesome. And you sometimes also romanticize those things. So as you're in your new state of being, you look back at the older ones,
mhm.
um, and it's a good thing if you can romanticize it. It's like, oh, it was really good, this and that. So how much of that, the good things, can I also implant on this one? So it all makes sense, yeah. And I agree with what you say. There is indeed, you know, people might forget the fact that as an adult, there's a lot of cool things that you have that you didn't have as a kid.
Mhm.
But I think what people miss from their childhood is the things they don't have as an adult, and that is what, no worries,
Yeah.
no worries. Like, people take care of you. What are we gonna eat? You know, yeah, whatever. Or you're gonna like, hey, I want to eat spaghetti, and if you say it often enough, there's gonna be spaghetti on the table. How? What kind of life is that? Like, oh, I want this, and you keep repeating it enough, you're gonna get that.
It's pretty dope.
That's pretty dope. But yeah, I'm sorry for diluting the conversation as well. Like I'm pulling you left and right in this whole thing.
It's
My
it's
apologies.
absolutely beautiful. I wanted to talk to you about food, because you started a food truck business. We're not going to talk about it today because we are coming up to an hour, sadly. We're going to have to do another episode and then another, because I want to talk to you about joy and connection and belonging and setbacks and being a programmer. There's just so much to talk about. But this has been fascinating. It's been very interesting. I want to say one last thing and then let you kind of bring us to a close as you see fit. This thing about childhood and being an adult, in some way there's a given bit of trust as a child. you know you don't consciously have to trust the universe, but you kind of do. You walk around naked and keep asking for spaghetti, and somehow it works out. Sometimes it doesn't, but you forget about it. And you're not kind of keeping tabs on, is daddy going to do this thing, and is mommy going to do this thing, and is grandma going to give me that present that she promised. Kind of somehow there's this natural trust, and as an adult, it's almost as if we have to choose trust in life. regardless of
Mhm.
whether we are choosing all the time or somebody else is giving us the advice, but kind of all this anxiety that we run around with. And now we have this added challenge of choosing to trust on top.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's so funny. It also reminds me, like, yeah, we do trust, and our worries and wants are so different. Like your worries are, they're on a different scale. And the other day, my friend and I were discussing something, and his daughter was walking around. She was also like, we are doing a call, and at a certain point, I said, "Hey, looks like your father's gonna be rich very soon. What do you want?" And she just, looks in the camera, and like, "I want a cat." Like, kids are fantastic in that their goals and what they want in life is just fascinatingly pure, and she wants a cat. Daddy could be Bezos, doesn't matter, she wants a cat, you
And
know
that's what matters.
um so I think even if we can't go back to being children, we can learn lessons from our children, so that the simple things in life are, sometimes a thing like a cat is worth more than $70 billion on daddy's bank account. So, and also, thanks for having me on the show. You said you wanted to have me a few more times. I'd love to be on the show. Like, it's much more fun to be a guest, I suppose, because I, I get to talk a lot without feeling like, oh man, should the guest do the speaking? And um, yeah, sure, if I can help, why not?
Absolutely. I think this is going to be a whole bunch of fascinating series of topics and series of shows that we're going to do together, one way or another. Thank you, Errol. What a beautiful conversation today, going from transformations to trust, to children, to adults, to choice, to lack of choice. I think for our viewers, let's end on the fact that children are always transforming with a bit of trust and a whole lot of playfulness. And as Errol says, let's learn a bit from them. Know what we want, and if there's an opportunity, just keep repeating it until the universe gives it to you, and ask for help if you need, and forget about it when you want to forget about it. Live a little.
I agreed, Balach. You said, you said a lot of things in that conclusion alone. That's like 5 topics right there. Okay. Thank you, Balach. It was nice seeing you again and talking to you again.
It's a pleasure. See you soon again. Ciao,
Bye.
everybody.